Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Literature and Literature. Thank you so much for watching, and today I'm going to be talking about Old English literature. This is going to be the first lecture, and I'll be continuing it till I complete the British literature in its entirety from UGC net point of view. First thing I would like to say is that I won't cover like a lot of things because I feel not everything is important from competitive point of view, and the reason why people do not get selected and are not able to really think of what they read in the examination is because they focus on way too much, and the more you focus on, the less you're going to remember. So the better option is going to be do less but remember it better. It is better to revise like 10, 20, 30 times a single book rather than you know taking 9, 10 books and being able to revise them only once, because ultimately you should be able to remember and think about it in the examination hall. Otherwise it's of no use. So that is why my notes are going to be very crisp. I am not going to cover like everything that I think should be covered just to make the video a bit longer. I think I'll be covering only the most important things and some not so important things, but I'll be telling you that this is not important because there are things that we need to know in order to build that base, right? So that we understand the things that come in later. So that's first. Second thing is that in my notes, everything that's written in a highlighted color. For example, in this video I'm going to be I have used sky blue color. So that means that it is either a heading or it's going to be very important and you should memorize it. Something that's written in a regular gel pen ink, the blue colored one, is mostly for your understanding, and yes, of course, for memorizing as well. Third thing, the things that are written in pencil are some things that can be left, or a very very vague idea would suffice our purpose. All right, so let's begin with today's video. Um, Old English literature. So, if I talk about the olden times, if just think about it, right? What used to happen in the olden times? We did not have a state as we call it right now, right? It was more of I won't say a chaos, but of course things were not that defined as they are today. So people were fighting, people were conquering, people were killing, and this was the kind of atmosphere that was prevalent at that point of time. So, as I said, literature is going to be reflective of its age. It's going to reflect that people, like for example, if right now COVID is going on, so obviously people are going to make the pandemic as the background of their works or their whatever, maybe serials for that matter. So, that is a thing with literature because you are going to be preoccupied by whatever is going around you. So you're going to write about it. Similarly, in the Old English literature period, as I said, wars and such things were very common. So, of course, the writings that we have during that time are based on such things. I will talk about the literature and give you the examples so that you can better understand it. But for now, I'll be telling you about the invasions that happened in Britain. Initially, we had Celts, then we had Romans, then we had Anglo Saxons, then we had Vikings, then we had Normans. And see, we had a series of conquests. It's not just like once or twice. Numerous people have tried to conquer this island, and there are reasons for it, of course. Britain was supposedly very fertile during that time, and that is why people were conquering it. Now, some of you might be thinking, what is fertility? Why is fertility something that is required for a person to rule there? Well, if you do not know, then I'll try to explain. See, at that time, we did not really have money, and we did not really would pay people. So, what used to happen? The soldiers would be paid in what? They would be paid in grains. And how would you have grains? Only if the land is fertile. So, the more fertile the land is, more is going to be your um, collection of grains, and more the collection, the more you can dispense it, right? So that is why having a fertile land under you came in very handy, and it was used to build a big army, and a bigger army, a stronger army meant more conquests, right? And that was the primary purpose at that time. All right. So okay, Celts were the original ones, they were there. Then came Romans. Now, one thing that you have to remember about Romans is that there was a Latin influence that they brought with them. In fact, as I've written here, the modern English alphabet, which has 26 letters in it, was inspired from the Latin alphabet. Of course, today things are different, and many letters have come in and gone out. So what we have today is not exactly what was there in the olden times, but of course, the inspiration remains from the Romans, from the Latin alphabet. After Romans came Anglo Saxons. Now, Anglo Saxons is just a wide term we say uh, in order to talk about Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, which also were called as the Germanic tribes. So, uh, before I go ahead, I would like to tell you that Germanic tribes did not really mean that they were from Germany. Germany as a nation did not exist back then, right? What existed then? Germanic tribes is a term that we give to the people that came from the Scandinavian countries. Scandinavian countries, you understand? Scandinavian countries are Norway, Denmark, Sweden, these cold countries towards the north of the earth. So these are called Scandinavian countries, and these tribes had come from there, and they came and settled in England. And Angle land, because it was the land of Angles, so Angle land translated to what we today call England. Angle land, England, right? Of course. Now, King Arthur. Now, this is a very prominent figure in the Old English literature and in the Middle English literature. We'll talk about him. But, if you have a brief idea about who King Arthur was and his knights of the Round Table, you know, this has always been a matter of contest whether King Arthur was a real personality or was he a fictitious character. Now, this, of course, as I said, is contested. So, if at all he existed, the people who say that he did exist for real say that this was the time when Angles and Saxons and Jutes were invading England. This was the time when King Arthur led a defense against these tribes. Of course, he lost. That is why Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, the Germanic tribes, they came and settled in England. So, what next? Of course, we talked about the Germanic tribes who have come and settled. Now, of course, they have settled here, so obviously they're going to have some kind of influence. Just as I said, in Romans there was a Latin influence, so we took a lot of Latin words into English. What happened in the Anglo-Saxons? What happened was that their influence, their influence on the natives' language, because there was a certain language being spoken even before the Germanics came, right? After they came, there was a mixing up of the language, or I would say the language that existed took a lot of things from the Germanic tribes, and then we have the formation of Old English. Now, this is something that we have to deal with, and this is the literature we're going to deal with. So, this is what, right? The native language. And who are the natives right now? They are Celts plus the Roman influence a little bit. That is what the language is right now. Then came the Germanic tribes, and that led to the formation of Old English literature. Okay, now which genre um, developed during this period? Poetry. Now, poetry was considered like it was considered very, I would say, prestigious. Everything people would try to write in verse form. So when we'll see the kind of texts that were written in this period, we'll know that poetry was one of the most prominent and prestigious kind of a writing. Okay, so I think that is a good amount of background that we have. Um, okay, now we come to the first very important text in the Old English literature, which is Beowulf. If you have even a little knowledge about English literature, you're going to know about Beowulf. Now, um, the story of Beowulf is important from UGC net point of view, and we will not go into the details, but very, I would say, the apparent details should be known. So, uh, Beowulf opens in Denmark. It opens in Denmark. I just told you that the Scandinavian countries include Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. And we know that in the Old English times, whose influence do we have? We have the influence of the Germanic tribes, right? So now their influence is very visible. Setting of the poem is in Denmark. Now, what is the story? There's this king whose name is Hrothgar. Hrothgar. Rothgar has a mead hall. Mead hall, you understand? Mead hall means anywhere that you feast, you celebrate, you enjoy. So he has this hall where his soldiers enjoy, and this mead hall is called Heorot. This can be asked. I mean, it won't be a direct question in UGC. They don't really ask such questions, but this will help you to kind of eliminate at times. So it's better if you know, if you remember Heorot. It's a mead hall. And there's this monster whose name is Grendel. I'm sorry for the cat like drawing, but I meant it to be a monster. So, this monster, Grendel, he's very angered by these soldiers who are feasting and enjoying. And what does he do to take revenge? He goes and eats them. Wow, what a simple solution, Hannah. So, he eats them, and this is something that annoys Rothgar. Of course, who would like that his soldiers are being eaten by a monster? So, then we have Beowulf, and Beowulf is a Geatish prince, and he kind of volunteers that he's going to fight against Grendel. Very brave he is, right? So, what does he fight Grendel with? He fights him with his hands, bare hands. He does not use swords. The symbol is for the symbol that I've used is for fighting, but he fights with the hands and he defeats Grendel. What happens next? Now, Grendel, of course, is killed, but now Grendel's mother will take revenge from Beowulf. Of course, then they two fight again. Beowulf again emerges victorious, and then follows a 50 years of peaceful reign under Beowulf. But that's not the end to it, right? Then one day comes a dragon. Now, this dragon will be able to inflict certain wounds on Beowulf, and he'll be almost on the verge of dying. But before dying, Beowulf will name his successor, and the successor is Wiglaf. He will name him and then he will die. So that's the end of Beowulf. You don't really need to know the allegorical representation, allegorical thing to this, but if you want to, Grendel represents Asia and the dragon represents Africa. And the fact that Beowulf is able to kind of overpower the both of them also, some people say is about being able to rule over more and more places. The theme of colonization, which came in, of course, much later. Old English is not the time to talk about it, but some critics do interpret it like that. Also, you see, I told you that these Germanic tribes were there at this time. There was this belief of supernatural. People believed in the supernatural during that time, and that is why you have the monsters and the witches. All of these you will find a lot of supernatural elements in the Old English literature and in the Middle English literature. When I talk about other works, you will know it. Supernaturalism was very, I won't say sought after, but yes, it was believed in. So of course, the literature would be representative of whatever is going around. All right, that's about Beowulf. You should know that it is anonymous at that time. I would say the possession, the authorship was not claimed by people. It was just anonymous. Most of the texts that you have during this time are anonymous, and Beowulf is no exception. This work is written in alliterative verse. You should know what alliterative verse means. If you know what blank verse is, so alliterative verse is somewhat like that, but on an even, I would say, lesser level. Alliterative verse had a rhythm. It had no rhyme, of course, no rhyme. Kind of rhythm, a pattern, whatever you want to call it, that was there. Um, then this thing, the manuscripts, I said there was no claim for ownership. People did not really write poetry for being famous or anything. Had that been the case, they would have written their names down, right? But that did not happen. So now we have this important personality. His name is Sir Robert Cotton. Sir Robert Cotton was a visionary enough to have thought of the importance of such texts for posterity. Posterity means for the coming generation. So he felt that these texts could hold some importance, perhaps, and that is why he preserved them. And his collection and his preservation of works is very important for us today when we look at Old English and Middle English literature. So Sir Robert Cotton's collection is the one in which Beowulf as a poem figures, and that is where we know it from. That is important. So now this, as I said, Sir Robert's collection, Sir Robert Cotton's collection. There are other collections. We'll talk about them. There's the Vaseli book, there's the Exeter book. Exeter book you must have heard about. So Exeter book and Vaseli book, all of them were collections of manuscripts. We'll talk about them. You don't really need to exactly remember which book was there in which one, which poem was there in which book. But like Beowulf is something that's really important. You should know everything about it. So you should know which book it was preserved in, right? So which collection it was preserved in. Also, Beowulf holds importance because it has been translated by these three prominent people, and I think everybody knows J.R.R. Tolkien and Seamus Heaney, William Morris. We'll read about them in the modern and Victorian age, and at that time you'll have a clearer idea. So J.R.R. Tolkien will, um, you will see that he has this supernatural element in his works. So you can remember it like that because he was dealing with the supernatural. He could have translated something that was supernatural, which is Beowulf. So okay, we'll talk about him in detail later. So J.R.R. Tolkien, Seamus Heaney, William Morris are the three people who've translated Beowulf, and Seamus Heaney's version of Beowulf is perhaps the most popular. So you should definitely remember that Seamus Heaney was somebody who translated Beowulf. Then you have other old English poems, and none of them is as important as Beowulf is. So, of course, you should know the names, you should have an idea, but Beowulf has an importance which is unparalleled. Okay, fight at Finnsburg and Finnsburg fragment, whatever you want to call it. So there is this person called Hanif, and he with his 16 retainers or soldiers, if you want to call them, they're trying to prevent an attack on the Finns fort. Now, see, I told you that the wars and killings that were very common. So, see, again, the theme of the poem is that only. In the previous one, Beowulf, again, there was war, there was monstrous, there was a monster, so you had to kill him, like that. Then there is Wanderer, there's Seafarer. Seafarer is important because it was translated by Ezra Pound. Now, Ezra Pound, if you know, is a very, very famous American writer. When we do American literature, we're going to talk about him. And yeah, so he translated the Seafarer, and Seafarer, you don't really need to go into the details of Seafarer because there's a very low chance of this being asked, but because it's very easily understood from the title, I'll tell you a little bit. So this man, he goes on the sea, and he misses his people, and he wants to be with his family. But when he's given a choice, or when he thinks, he decides that no, he wants to be at the sea only because being at sea is something that he really loves. So that's about Seafarer. Then you have a husband's message, the husband's message. I'm sorry, I haven't written a or the. It should be something. Never mind. So then there's Dior's lament, or Dior, whatever you want to call it. So in Dior's lament, there's this singer, and the singer is very sad at the fact that his rival has replaced him in the royal court. And he feels sad about it, but then he thinks of other people who are suffering, and he kind of gets that confidence, he kind of gets that positivity that something good will happen. So this is about Dior's lament. And then you have Caedmon's hymn. This is important. This is a Christian kind of work in which there is this person. Okay, Caedmon's hymn is written by Caedmon, and it is the oldest surviving English poem, and Caedmon is also called the first poet in Old English. Now, what happens in this poem is that Caedmon is in a feast, and you know everybody is singing there and contributing a song. But Caedmon is so ashamed of not being able to contribute a song that he just leaves the feast out of that shame. So, then he dreams of this man who tells him to sing to me the beginning of all things, which means sing to me the creation, about the creation. So, this man tells him that, and Caedmon decides to do that, and Caedmon ultimately ends up becoming a good singer. He's able to contribute songs. So that is about Caedmon's hymn. Then you have Cynewulf. Cynewulf's importance lies in the fact that Cynewulf was one of the first people to have signed towards the end of their poems. Now, Cynewulf wrote like the fates of the apostles, Christ, or the Ascension, and He signed during the time when people were not claiming authorship. So that is why he's remembered. Also, you can remember it like this, that Sign Wolf has the name Sign, you call it Sign, and this is Sign as well. So that is how you remember that Sign Wolf was the perhaps the first one to write down his name or claim authorship to his poems. His works are preserved in the Exeter book. Now, Exeter book, where does the name come from? This is not very important, but it comes from the Exeter Cathedral, to which the collection of manuscripts was submitted by Bishop Leofric. You don't have to remember any of this. Just remember that this is written in the Exeter book, and Steinwolf was known for signing his texts. Then comes a very important poem, The Dream of the Rood. Again, a Christian theme. The rood, this has been asked. The rood means rod, means pole, means cross. Cross on which Christ was crucified. This is again an alliterative, for that matter. Even Seinwolf wrote in the alliterative verse. Everybody, I mean, almost everybody was writing in alliterative verse at that point of time. So, The Dream of the Rood was preserved in the Vercelli book, and there are three parts to this poem. It shows the author's vision of the cross, in which he sees that the cross is covered with gems, and it's so beautiful and it's magnificent, but there is blood on it. So the next part is about how the cross tells him the story of the crucifixion. He tells him the entire story, and then he says that you should share it with more and more people. The third part is when the narrator is kind of reflecting on whatever he saw, and he's full of praise to God, or praise of God. That is the dream of the root. You should know dream of the root properly, because this has been asked, the meaning of the root, so they can ask you all of this. Ecclesiastical history of the English people is perhaps one of an exception, because this is a prose work written at a time when poetry was something that was a popular form of expression. So this is written by Venerable Bede. This is written in Latin, unlike what we have read before. All of the things that we talked about before this have been written in Old English, but this text has been written in Latin. And this talks about, as the name suggests, it talks about the history of England and the Christian churches in England. So again, a Christian theme. Then you have Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. This was compiled under Alfred the Great. Who was Alfred the Great? Alfred the Great was a king of the southern part of England, and he was quite famous that when he kind of knew the importance of literature, and in his time, a lot of literature has been written, translated to Old English. And Anglo-Saxon Chronicle was about the history of Anglo-Saxons. So yeah, Alfred the Great is also, remembered because he led the defense against the Vikings. I told you that King Arthur led the defense against the Germanic tribes, and Alfred the Great, he led the defense against the Vikings. So that is about Alfred the Great, and mm, that's it. That's it for Old English literature. I don't think you need to know more than this. I mean, yeah, I don't think you need to know more than this, because you have to ultimately memorize also, no? And trust me, reading a lot will not help. It will not help. Just memorize whatever you have, and you're good to go. Trust me when I say that. Um, all right, now I'll tell you one more thing. Like we read, right? Whatever poems and everything. Now you should try and form a general idea. I'll tell you for this video, so that you have an idea about how it is done. Again, I'm saying something, I'm giving a disclaimer. This is only for the beginners, because the experienced people, they know how you have to analyze, and you have to kind of develop a general understanding, so that you can guess in the final examination, because the question will never be an easy one in the exam. It will always be about um, it will always be something that you have to derive from the knowledge that you have. So the better that knowledge is, the better you remember it, the better you're going to perform in the exam. So never run after a lot of sources. That is really, really not going to help. Initially, all of us are in this what should I say, I mean, all of us want to be just the best, and we want to do our best. Even when I was doing it, I was studying, I don't know how many books and what all I read to make just those perfect notes. But trust me, more than perfection, you have to focus on memorization, because nobody's going to see your notes. They're going to see what is there in your mind and how you present it in the examination hall. That is what they're going to see. So make sure that you remember what you read rather than reading a lot. Of course, you can read later on once you become and you clear UGC net. For now, you should focus on memorizing. All right, I was telling you about a general trend. So, what trend do you see in these? First thing, alliterative verse. So, if there's a question in the exam where you do not know the answer and they're asking you about the verse, you can always think that it could be alliterative, because almost all the works have been written in the alliterative in the Old English period. Of course, in later you will go to the French influence when Anglo Normans will come. Um, when the Normans would come and the Anglo-Norman age would be there, at that time you'll see the meter is going to develop. For now, there is no meter also. It's just a very raw form of the meter, which we call as the alliterative verse. So, right now we have alliterative verse. That's first. Second is there is a fighting theme. There is a warlike theme in many of the poems. Then there is this theme of uh, Christianity. You have the Dream of the Rood, you have Caedmon's hymn, right? Even Wolf, he's writing about the fates of the apostles. Apostles were the followers of Christ, right? And he's writing about Christ too. So there's a Christian theme as well. So that is about it. These are the just a few trends here and there which I felt in Old English literature, and that's it. Um, I would like you to find out about Sejora a little bit. I haven't written it down. I want you to find it out. Because if you'll try and find it out, you will learn two more things. And you will remember it because you've researched it on your own. So find out what Sejora is and what's its importance in the Old English literature. That's it from my side for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos. The next lecture is going to be on Anglo-Norman period, and that's going to be a short video. So stay tuned. Bye bye.